Defendant's aggressive cost cutting endangered the Rust cast and crew. So here we get to probably how most of these producers are going to be brought into this lawsuit. The Rust production companies were low-budget film production companies in the business of making films and were responsible for soliciting talent for the Rust production and hiring the crew to produce the film. The Rust production companies utilized aggressive cost-cutting practices during the Rust production that jeopardized and endangered the safety of the cast and crew of Rust. Defendants' cost-cutting measures included hiring inexperienced and unqualified armorers or weapons masters, requiring the film's armorer to split time as assistant props master, establishing and aggressively adhering to unreasonably rushed production schedules, and hiring unqualified and inexperienced crew and staff that were responsible for safety during the production. So these are all different things that different individuals could have been responsible for. You know, who was in charge of hiring her? Hannah Gutierrez Reed. Who was in charge of managing her role? Who was in charge of setting the schedule, setting the timeline? Who was in charge of hiring other unqualified and inexperienced crew and staff that were responsible for safety during the production? So all of these people are getting brought in here because of the fact that she was allegedly inexperienced and other people were allegedly inexperienced. The Rust production companies hired Miss Hutchins as the director of photography of Rust as an independent contractor. Miss Hutchins brought her own equipment to the production and was responsible for forming her own team for the camera department, including camera operators, gaffers, and dolly grips. The Rust production was the first time Miss Hutchins had worked with the Rust production companies, the producers, or director Joel Souza. So she had to even bring in her own equipment. That's interesting. On October 6, 2021, the cast and crew of the Rust production began shooting the film. The script for Rust included numerous scenes involving the presence of firearms and simulated gunfights, rather than use computer-generated or digital effects together with prop guns that were not capable of firing ammunition. Excuse me. The Rust production companies and the producers decided to use real live firearms. So despite the fact that they had the capability to do this digitally, they decided to go with what looks the most real, right? Rather than paying money for digital effects, so to speak. The aggressive cost-cutting measures of the Rust production companies resulted in the Rust production being riddled with breaches of safety protocols that resulted in the presence of live ammunition on the set of Rust and unsafe handling of firearms. On two separate occasions prior to the shooting of Miss Hutchins, guns on the Rust production had been discharged in an unsafe manner while loaded with ammunition. In response to these weapons discharges and inadequate firearm inspections, crew members of the production made complaints about safety on the set to supervisors, including the executive producers, and line producers. Oh boy, these complaints were ignored. The producers held no safety meetings. Oof, that's bad. They took no action to prevent further unsafe handling of firearms. They did not suspend the production to investigate the weapons discharges or the inadequate adherence to safety protocols. Instead, the producers decided to go full steam ahead and rush the filming of the production to keep costs down. Now, notice that they are not alleging here. They're not alleging that the production companies and the producers and whatnot didn't do enough for safety. They are saying they did nothing for safety. They had no safety meetings. They ignored complaints of safety by, safety issues by different people on set. and those complaints were made directly to supervisors, executive producers, and line producers. This means that not only, earlier I was talking about there's kind of this corporate chain of command, right? Somebody reports to somebody else, reports to some kind of executive producer at some point, right? But you've got people that are it looks like that are reporting directly to these different individuals and saying they ignored them. So you don't even have to rely on that kind of like not phone tag. What's the word? Game of telephone, so to speak, to say that somewhere along the line communications broke down. No, these are individual people that had been made that had complaints made directly to them and they ignored them. That is damning if true. Very damning if true. And the fact that they didn't have any safety meetings, also very damning. And the fact that they didn't suspend the production to investigate the weapons discharges. So no one stopped when there was a weapons discharge. No one was like, "Hey, what's going on? This is unsafe. We need to make sure that this doesn't result in somebody getting hurt." Yikes. That is bad if true. Bad for the defendants. A few short days before the death of Miss Hutchins, Lane Looper, a local camera operator for the production, made safety complaints to the producers. On October 16th, 2021, Mr. Looper told defendant Walters, a representative for the producers, that there had been 3 unsafe weapon discharges and the set was, quote, super unsafe. Defendant Walters responded with callous sarcasm, saying the accidental discharges were, quote, awesome and, quote, sounded good. Oy. That is bad. That is really bad. So Walters was a representative for the producers. So okay. So and then for anybody that is listening on the podcast version, they included in here some screenshots of some text messages. Now, of course, they've been cut out very closely, so we can't see any context beforehand or afterwards. And there's always something that could be lost by losing that context. But here's what it says. So we've got in text writing in blue, and it looks like an iPhone screen, right? Text writing in blue. We've now had 3 accidental discharges. This is super unsafe. And wrap should be like 30 to 45, I think. And then the text response was accidental discharge on the firearms. Awesome. Sounds good. Oh my God. That's nuts. If that's the response and no one was alarmed, no one was concerned about safety, that is bad. We are definitely getting to at least recklessness for at least some of these individuals, right? Okay. The producers chose not to take the safety complaint by Mr. Looper seriously and brushed the safety concerns under the rug because investigating and addressing these safety concerns would delay production and stretch the production budget. Woof. We have people that are taking budget concerns above safety concerns. That's bad. That's bad. Okay, now some people are saying in the chat that it sounds like sarcasm. Now that is possible. Referring to the text exchange, the response, accidental discharge on the firearms, awesome, sounds good. I don't know. That could potentially be sarcasm, and that's what I mean by context can sometimes matter in this kind of a situation. And if it is sarcasm, that is something that would be talked about, in a deposition, in witness testimony and whatnot. When this person that responded, you know, put, when they are ultimately brought in discovery and asked about this whole exchange, they would have an opportunity to say, like, "Well, that's not what I meant," and this person would understand that that's not what I meant. Um, Now that is not relevant for determining whether or not this complaint is a good one or a bad one. So, despite the fact that this could be taken out of context and it could be that context shows that this is actually sarcasm, um, despite that, we are, like I said, we're taking all facts as they are alleged as true. We're assuming that this is true. We're assuming that what they're saying is that this text response means that this guy was just ignoring it and that he was saying, "Awesome, that's great. That sounds good." Sounds good that there is an accidental, discharge, etc. Um so that's that. Theo Frastus, thanks for your super chat. It says, my military unit regularly trained with the full auto M16 rifle, all 180 troops, including cooks, mechanics, and typists. What I'm hearing is appalling. Yeah, it is appalling. I do agree. I agree. The fact that there's, according to the allegations, there is there are many people that were complained to about the situation, and they decided to just ignore it. Um, whether or not that's true is going to be coming up, in discovery, right? Or in whatever response that each defendant files with the court, because they either are going to be filing a motion to dismiss or they're going to be filing an answer. At some point, assuming that the case doesn't get dismissed, at some point they have to file an answer. So even if they file a motion to dismiss at one point, if they lose on that, then they have to follow that up with filing an answer. And that's how you proceed with the litigation. So they may say, okay, well, those are text messages between me and so, but that doesn't exactly capture the conversation that we had. So anyhow, potentially criminal. Thank you so much for your super chat. Just tuned in, but do you think this was filed because they were told that Baldwin will not be charged criminally? No, I don't think so. I think that they were probably going to be filing this no matter what, regardless of whether or not he was going to be charged criminally. And that is because when we are talking about a criminal case versus a civil case, the burden is much higher in a criminal case. It's generally speaking much easier to sue someone successfully civilly, especially where we're talking about a negligence claim or a wrongful death claim like this, in comparison to a criminal case. So, but the thing about waiting for a criminal case to happen is that if, let's say, New Mexico, let's say charges are filed against Alec Baldwin at some point, because my understanding is that the investigation is still ongoing. I don't think they've completed it. I haven't seen any reporting that they've completed their investigation. So I know that a lot of people are upset about the fact that Alec Baldwin has not been charged at this point. I don't know that means that he's not going to be charged. I think there's still a possibility of that, unless someone can correct me that the police in New Mexico have completed their investigation and they decided that they're done and they're not going to charge him. My understanding, like I said, is that has not actually happened yet. So it could still be the case that he's charged. Now, there can also be a criminal case and a civil case happening at the same time. If the criminal case goes forward, and let's say Alec Baldwin is charged criminally, and he is found guilty of some kind of manslaughter or murder, even, of Halyna Hutchins. That determination by a jury can be applied to a civil case because it's much harder to find a criminal defendant guilty than it is to find civil liability against a defendant. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Basically, you can say, because the standard is so much higher and a jury, despite that standard, still found him guilty, that's definitely going to meet the civil standard, right? So you can definitely apply that over here. The same is not necessarily true of a civil case, because just somebody can find someone civilly liable. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're also criminally liable, because there's that little space of burden that has to be met. So you still would have a need for a full trial for a criminal case after a civil case. That's why a lot of times you'll see civil cases kind of wait until criminal charges are filed, or that or that a full trial will happen, because it kind of eliminates a lot of work on the part of the civil side, because they can just kind of apply that. Now, it's not necessarily the case if the person is acquitted that means that they wouldn't be held liable civilly. So, like I said, it's a way that they could eliminate some of the work on the civil side. But in this particular case, I mean, at the same time, they still have a statute of limitations that is running for any civil case. So you can't wait too long to file a case. So in this situation, it seems to me that they were probably just waiting on investigating, either from the police in their investigation, or they were probably also doing their own, and probably, maybe talking with all kinds of individuals from the set, talking with all kinds of, gathering all kinds of information on these different production companies, on these different individuals, on, who was doing what at different times. So that's probably why it took some time. And I think that the reason why they would file this in the first place, to really answer the question of the super chat, is that, you have somebody that died. I mean, this is a situation that is definitely going to have a civil lawsuit, like regardless of whether there's any criminal charges, because you have somebody who died that was not supposed to die, and in a way that they were not supposed to die. So you have somebody who is, who has civil damages. So whether or not those will be massive or minuscule will depend on what comes out in the litigation, in discovery. But my guess is that it's probably going to be about as much as they can possibly claim, because there's a lot of entities, there's a lot of individuals, a lot of pockets that they can pull from in this particular case. So that answers that, I hope. Okay. Moving back to the complaint. Paragraph 62. The producers chose not to take the safety complaint by Mr. Looper seriously and brushed the safety concerns under the rug because investigating and addressing these safety concerns would delay production and stretch the production budget. On the morning of Miss Hutchins' tragic death, October 21st, 2021, the safety dangers of the production had reached a crisis point. The local camera crew members were so upset by the producers' utter disregard for the safety that they protested the safety conditions by going on strike. Now, we've also heard some reporting that maybe some of that had to do with housing. That's possible. I mean, that may be kind of a counter argument by some of these defendants, that that's not really what they were, arguing about. It wasn't really so much about safety conditions, but regardless, like I said, we are taking these allegations as true. And so if we are to do that, that's pretty damning. If this does prove to be true, that's pretty damning in this lawsuit. Mr. Looper put his concerns in writing, telling the producers of the Rust film the reason for the strike was, quote, 3 areas where safety has become a massive issue, and massive is in bold and italics. One of those 3 areas was safety, with ellipses, with weapons. Mr. Looper explained, and here's a box for anybody that's listening for the podcast version. There's a box here that seems to be a direct quote from some kind of a statement somewhere. It doesn't exactly say where from. I wish it did, but okay. Mr. Looper explained, the second issue I'd like to bring up in regards to safety has to do with weapons. During the filming of gunfights on this job, things are often played very fast and loose. So far, there have been 2 accidental weapons discharges and 1 accidental SFX explosives that have gone off around the crew between takes. I personally suffer from pretty bad tinnitus, and the SFX explosives sent my ears ringing until I got home. To be clear, there are no safety meetings these days. There have been no explanations as to what to expect for these shots. When anyone from production is asked, we are usually met with the same answers about not having enough time to complete the day if we rehearse, or that it was, quote, this is a 21-day shoot. Ugh. Oh my God. That is bad. It's bad. It's really bad, guys. If this is true, then these people are asking the producers directly. They're saying, "Oh, what is going on here? What is there are explosives that are going off. There are weapons discharges that are happening that are not supposed to be happening. What are we doing to prevent these from hurting somebody?" And they're just saying, "Oh, I don't know. We don't have time." That is not a good answer when you have a lawsuit like this, when you have somebody who has died. Maybe if no one had gotten hurt, then no one would be talking about these production issues, right? But the fact that somebody died, now we're talking about them. And now these people are going to be probably in some really big trouble for having those kind of responses. Defendants did nothing to improve firearm safety in response to Mr. Looper's written safety warnings. Defendant Pickle insisted that Mr. Looper and the other camera operators going on strike due to safety conditions get off the set and remove the equipment they had brought for use on set as quickly as possible to avoid any impact on the Rust production schedule and budget. Defendant Pickle responded on behalf of the producers. And now we have this looks like an excerpt from an email. So this is probably part of the investigation that they did was that they were gathering all kinds of different communications between people. This is so here's an excerpt from an email from Gabrielle Pickle. This is one of the defendants on October 21st, 2021 at 6:40, and I'm guessing it's AM. It doesn't say AM or PM. It says, Lane, good morning. Please call myself or Ro when you or your team arrive at Bonanza Creek. We will coordinate your gear delivery in a way that does not impact the shoot day. Thank you, Gabrielle. So there you go. They have emails to back up some of these allegations. That definitely they don't need it. A complaint does not need to have these little excerpts from emails and text messages and stuff, but it really does bolster it, and it does help to prevent the situation that I was talking about before, where somebody just decides to file a motion to dismiss um to try to drum up legal costs, because it looks it looks kind of bad if you're trying to do that, and you see that they have actual evidence to back it up, because you can see that they're embedding them in this complaint. Paragraph 66. Defendant Pickle's response on behalf of the producers showed no concern or care for the quote massive unquote safety concerns of the striking crew, nor did the production company's response deny the quote 2 accidental weapons discharges unquote and quote 1 accidental SFX explosive, unquote. The producer's sole concern was that the camera operator's departure not delay the aggressive production schedule and cost them money. So this seems to suggest that the previous excerpt that we read from by Mr. Looper was in email, and that's what it seems like. That's what Gabriel Pickle was responding to was that specific email. Just based on this context here. I wish that had been clearer, but I mean, I feel like at this point I'm being a little bit nitpicky on this complaint, because otherwise this is very so far this is a well-drafted complaint, and they're making it very clear who's responsible for what, and how these various responsibilities are playing out.